Yep, you're doing that.
Which one? Join from your browser?
Yep.
And then, is that all right? We got
Yeah, we've
this
just
meeting.
started, Sue. We've just started.
It only just started.
Oh, I may have forgot to hit the pause button, so we're
Thank
Well,
you, Daniel.
let me reintroduce Sue Price, the First Lady of Men's Rights in Australia. She runs a men's rights agency, and we'll try to get you back up to scratch because the host has stuffed up the recording button. I
I
did
know
want
I've
to run this
spoken.
past you, Sue. I got this thing sent to me the other day, and it was from the very first Director General of the World Health Organization, and
All right.
it says to achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, their loyalty to family traditions, and the national patriotism and religious dogma. So I think it's pretty clear what the agenda is on how to break the family unit is to target predominantly men and destabilize them to the point where, for one reason or another, these poor buggers are not finding a purpose to continue life.
Have you just received that letter?
It's a very old quote, but it was sent to me recently. Yeah, that have a look at this. This is why they're doing what they're doing in the Western society as regards to targeting
It
men to
would be
destroy the family unit.
it would be interesting if you could put that up.
Yeah, my skill
The
set's not
quote.
that good.
Well, we'll try and find a way to do it
Yeah,
because
and
that's
I'll definitely get the
really
quote.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I can certainly put it up online if you send it to me. So that's brilliant because that's an out. Everybody's been saying, where's it coming from?
yeah,
And we sort of Marxist, this type of thing.
yep,
But there is a distinct movement to try and separate men from women. And
yes,
of course, this is why they 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 know they'll look after the women, and they do. And they know they'll get the women's vote, which they have.
yeah.
So, that's what's going on. And the men are really out on the outer.
Is it
Um,
fair to assume, Sue, do you think, and I think Labor members or Labor voters are the worst for this, but they've got this distinct delusion that because my father and grandfather voted Labor, I have to vote Labor because Labor's for the workers and Liberals for the businesses? You think that's still something that people struggle
no,
with?
well, I don't think it applies anymore. That's what one of the complaints have been,
Yeah,
that Labor has forgotten the workers,
yeah,
and the only people they add that they give their allegiance to is the unions.
yeah.
And the unions seem to be in it for whatever they can get out of it. And I think it's all been forgotten of what the original purposes were of unions, to protect and look after the workers, but they don't seem to be doing that.
Well, and to
It's
touch on that, every time Labor form government, the male suicide rate increases. So if it isn't a coincidence, there seems to be a definitive push from predominantly Labor to break the family unit.
I would think that's quite right. It's a correct assumption, and it's been very obvious to us over the years.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
you
I
know,
grew up a Labor voter. I really did. My dad voted Labor, and I'll tell you now, there is no way ever I'll be voting Labor again in my existence.
yeah, a lot of people were Labor voters, and quite rightly, the Labor did a good job, but they've strayed from their original
Yeah.
ethos of what
Yep.
they were supposed to do, and I don't think that's helpful. It's certainly not helpful to Australia. We, we we're seeing our country go down the gurgler very rapidly. We
Yeah.
we have a we have a birth rate which is diminishing. We can't even replace the number of people who die or leave the country. We're
Yeah.
down to about 1.4. We have more divorces in some states, particularly the ACT, than marriages.
Yeah.
We have growing numbers of children, over 1 million, who live without one of their parents, usually the father. We have growing problems with youth crime that nobody seems to be able to resolve. Like Queensland says, oh, we'll do adult time for the crime. So this is what the young people are looking for now. But in actual fact, what they're looking for when they join these gangs, they're looking for the community. They're looking for their family. and the
Family,
gang
yeah.
becomes their new family.
Yes.
So they're popular in their new family, they're taken care of, and away they go and do crime all over the place. And that's what's happening, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
what do we do about it?
The
Men
destruction
are,
of the fabric of society has been imposed. But the other thing, Sue, I want to touch on is that we hear all this political propaganda, I call it, that women need safeguarding and women need to be protected and women need to feel safe in their community and environment. Why do you think it is that they're bringing in so many immigrants that seem to not have any respect for women, but they're bringing them into a country that is force feeding the safety of women only?
well, the force feeding of the safety of women was the method used by the academic feminists, if I can say that, or extreme feminists, because they realized back in the 1980s that this was the way through to the government to be able to get funding and to get the status that they were looking for, and they got the self-importance that they needed, and that's what they did. They looked at Erin Pizzey, who started the first women's refuge in Chiswick
Yep.
in the 1980s, and they saw that she was getting praise, she was getting government funding, and then they moved her out because she said, but of all the people that come to me, 50% of them are just as bad as the men they're trying to run away from.
Yep.
So she was on the outer, and she was well and truly crucified for it. But the feminists, of course, learnt the business of being able to present women as being helpless and frightened and scared of living with this man that they keep telling them is so dangerous, so lethal, their life is going to be at risk. So what we've actually done from the 60s and 70s, when women's rights were all the primary concern, because we wanted women to have the independence, the knowledge, the ability to make decisions for themselves. What we've now turned women into is to be terrified, to be scared. We've gone backwards.
Yeah.
We've taken them a full circle backwards, so that now they don't know who to trust, they don't know what to do. And every time there's a slight argument or something like that in their family, I'm going to ring the police.
Yep. Yep.
And that's what happens.
Yeah, no, they've made them believe that they are vulnerable victims, and they made
Yeah,
them believe, and well, I think that society's been conditioned that no matter the situation, it's always a man's fault. And it's even
oh,
written somewhere,
exactly.
I think in the dualist model, that women are only ever violent if it's in self-defense. You
That's
know,
not true. Yeah.
no, which, anybody with half a brain cell left would know that
Yeah.
it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. Either party can be violent. And I mean, I'm pretty sure the numbers are 27.7% of interpersonal relationships. The highest percentage, sorry, is 27.7, and that's lesbian couples. They are the most
That's right.
violent.
Yes, that came out in the first ABS
Yeah.
research on this. But there's a chap called Michael Woods who came from one of the New South Wales University. He did a study on whether their response was in as a defence prospect, whether they were defending themselves, and he found that they weren't. It was very unlikely.
Yeah.
So there's been research on that, but a while ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing too. I was going through the 1 in 3 statistics yesterday before my meeting with the One Nation candidate, and it's very, they outline how if you interview 11,500 women and only 2,500 men, you're sort of going to get the narrative that you want when you're putting your hand out for extra federal funding, aren't we?
Yeah, of course they are. But it's well designed.
Yeah.
They know what questions to ask and they know how to put them. And of course, when you only ask a small percentage of the men what their circumstances are, of course you're going to get
Yeah.
a distorted figure, because that's the only way it can go. But we've asked them repeatedly, the ABS, to make sure that they have equal numbers of participants, so that at least we can get a fair summary of what is actually going on.
Yeah.
But doesn't seem to wash with them.
Well, that might counter the political ideology that's infected society, Sue, that, all these poor women are vulnerable victims and all these nasty men they're all violent
Yeah,
perpetrators just waiting to bust out of their gentleman shells.
yeah. It's a horrible situation. Look, obviously some women do end up being
Yeah. Genuine
attacked, assaulted, because not all men are good, but not all women are good either. So
Yeah.
you know, most of the research that's done overseas particularly is finding that it's virtually 50-50.
Yeah.
And it's even when there are deaths as a result of domestic violence, our last figures were that one woman is killed every 6 days, one man is killed every 8 days for the same reason.
Yeah.
Now, because we've got a 2 day difference, we don't count it.
Mm.
We don't care about the man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, 47 men
And
a
women,
week, you
yeah.
know, 47 men a week are being politically and legally coerced into taking their own life in this country. But nobody wants to talk about that. We just want to talk about the female victims.
And that's a shocking figure. And of course, you can also add to it the single vehicle car accidents.
Yep. Yeah,
People
which
run off the road and into a tree, you know. It means their insurance doesn't get cancelled
yep.
because it can't be put down to a suicide. It could be just an accident, but there are quite a lot of those as well that you can add on to it. But
Yeah.
you know, it's an outrageous situation what's going on, and of course we have the sad issue that women are far more likely to abuse their children,
Yeah.
and women kill more children. But do we talk about that?
No,
No.
it's a taboo topic, isn't it? Anything that's
Yeah.
outside the political narrative. And I've touched on this before with other interviewees, Sue, that it's almost like majority of today's men have been socially castrated and they're too fearful to have a public opinion that it might label them as, toxic masculinity or misogynistic or whatever other bullshit slang they can throw at them in
No,
order to
they've
silence
got,
them.
yeah, yeah. I think they are, because there are so many things that can kind of have a reaction to what they're thinking or what they're saying. First is probably their job. You know, if those sort of opinions go out around the place, they may lose their job. They'll be suddenly targeted because they're unsuitable. You know, the HR department will be on them, and they'll be out the door. And other people, you never know what they're thinking. I talk to a lot of people and try to get opinions, and it's quite amazing how many women that I do talk to agree with me about the domestic violence issue and say it shouldn't be happening the way it is. They shouldn't be making false allegations. But the trouble is, nobody will do anything about it.
Mm.
And I had that confirmed to me in 2009. I attended a Senate committee hearing, and I was pushing for perjury charges and those sort of things, saying, why don't we do them? And the woman sitting next to me, who I think was the 2IC for the Attorney General, she looked at me and she laughed. And she said, oh, Sue, I don't think we're ever going to do that, referring to charging women.
Wow, you want to tell her to give me a phone call? I mean, she needs to be told.
Yeah, I know. I know that's one of the problems that we have. We know that the police are instructed to take it easy on women, to not push it. If there's anything, if a man goes in with a complaint, it'll often be, oh no, there's not enough evidence there. No, we can't charge anyone with that. No, we can't do that. So the women get away with it because the police protect them. And the men, doesn't matter what the woman says about the man, he will be arrested or he will be removed from the house.
And just to go a little bit further on that, when the man is found to be not guilty, that's not what will be written down. It'll be written not enough evidence to prosecute, which,
That's probably quite right. But the trouble is with the domestic violence laws is that could take him months
yeah,
and months to get a hearing. I know in Queensland we've got something like 430 men in jail on remand for so-called breaching an order.
yeah,
They've had no hearing. They're going to be there for months
yeah,
because the courts are so jammed up. They just can't cope with it. One of our blokes had 20 adjournments. You
yeah.
imagine his solicitor charges him a couple of $1,000 every time they go to court,
Mm.
40
Yeah,
grand down the drain, and
yeah.
he's still not clear.
Mm. No, and I believe it's a deliberate business model move.
I'm very suspicious about that. Yes, Daniel, I think that's very highly likely.
Well, as we've spoken about, Sue, and I'm not as politically correct as you, but I believe most practicing family lawyers are nothing more than a parasite. By definition, they live off their host, so they exhume what they can get out of people, and then they destroy these people, and then they move on to the next poor bastard and do it all over again.
I think you've got a certain category that are like that, but I hope I have to live with this belief that somewhere along the line we're going to find solicitors who do have a conscience, do believe in justice, and do want to do the right thing. I think we've got some good solicitors. We certainly talk that way. They talk my language.
Yeah.
We seem to agree on things that need to be done. Like they're all talking at the moment about the unconstitutionality of the domestic violence laws.
Yeah.
We're looking at it, trying to find a way around it.
Yeah.
So that's a project that's on the go. So
Yeah.
this is what's needed. Obviously, all these solicitors, it's their chosen profession. You can't blame them for wanting to earn some money, but at least most of ours that we have are not charging the rates that a lot of them charge, like $550, $600 an hour.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
They're not worth that.
no.
But we've got ones that are down to 250, 350, which, all right, is still a lot of money, but it's better than some of what the majority are charging.
Well, let's be
So
honest, some of the bastards aren't worth paying a Happy Meal to.
I think a lot of them are half baked in what they do. They don't look at the issues. They don't investigate. If you look at the way the American lawyers or litigants work, they have their own investigators. They do their own investigations. They do their own research. The lawyers here tend to sit back and say, "Oh, what did you tell the police? What was the police interview like? What happened? What did she say?" And your defendant might be trying to say, "Well, look, I didn't do it because this, and this. This person's seen it. This person's seen the way she behaves." Do they interview them? Do they go and get a statement from them?
Hmm.
No, that's
Um,
too different.
I think the main thing too, Sue, is if they actually mandated and they said to these women or men that are whatever whoever's making the statement, if they were told directly, listen, we'll take down this information, but you need to know that if this is proven to be a false statement, you can and will be charged for this. And if they had a mandatory sentence, say even a minimum of 3 months, these men or women that are making false statements to police would definitely think twice about going down the path and going, oh, maybe I shouldn't
Yeah,
because I might end up locked up.
I think that's a very good point, Daniel. And once that came in and the word spread, you would find that people would be much more careful. And of course, the other people that could also perhaps be prosecuted are all these organizations who sit around having a cup of coffee with the women and say, "This is what you do. You make a statement to the police. You tell them that you're frightened of him. As long as you put fear into it, you'll get your order."
Yeah.
And of course, that's nonsense. That's not enough to convict someone of domestic violence.
No, it shouldn't
There's
be.
no proof whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, in this state now, they're talking about, Malinowskis was speaking about if you're a convicted pedophile now or the allegations and you can be locked up instantly for life. Well, that sounds good in theory, but the problem is you need to be pretty bloody sure that you've got the right person for the wrong crime. Otherwise, you're going to open up a can of worms here because these
They can't do
allegations are
that.
being
You know,
thrown around left, right, and centre nowadays in custody disputes.
yeah, that's just unconstitutional totally. It's certainly got nothing to do with justice because it's still if you go into court, if you're charged, you're still regarded as being innocent, and it's up to the prosecution to prove that you are guilty.
Yeah.
So they can't just make that assumption without doing the work and doing the interviews and doing the investigation.
Yeah, and if they had been doing some investigations, they would know, and I'm pretty confident they do, but they selectively let it go. But they would know that a lot of these women are using this for the golden ticket and an advantage in a family court custody dispute. For
Yeah.
sure they'd know.
It's the way into the family court, obviously, and this is what they're told when they go to any of the women's organizations. In fact, a lot of their solicitors will say to them as they walk in the door, "Have you got your domestic violence order yet?" "Oh, you haven't? All right, we'll help you."
Yeah.
And that's the first thing they do. So the domestic violence order gives them an entry into the family court. It gives them an entry that portrays them as being a victim, and the man that they've left as being a real proper bastard, because he's done all these things that he's supposed to have done. But there's no proof. There's
No.
nothing. Just her say so.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And without any evidence, they can then just move in, remove the man from the home. He's not allowed to see his kids. He's not allowed to speak to anybody about it because he's legally gagged down again. And then we're
Okay.
supposed to believe in a judicial system that only gives us a perception of justice without ever actually finding it. As a man, as you know, I've been in the legal system for 9 years, seven of which, or 8 years I spent in family court and chewed up and spat out. I'd done nothing wrong, but that didn't stop continual false allegations being made. And at the end of the day, now we have a chance to be able to bring this to the forefront where these politicians are expecting us to forget about what they've done to us and our families and our children. Now's the time where we have the opportunity to repay them and say, righto, I wrote to you, you didn't help me. I wrote to you, you didn't help me. I'm going to put my vote in a manner which is going to benefit me and mine instead of just voting in the manner in which dad said or granddad said or.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, I think, people have certainly got to be more thinking about what the decisions they're making.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope they do. And I hope they look at not just judging the party, but looking at the individual,
Yep.
the actual candidate, because that tells you a lot. We're pretty lucky where I am. We have a good LNP member, and he's very willing to help, which is really good. It's
Yeah.
not. That's what they do. That's what
Yeah.
they're supposed to do. So I don't have any regret on putting LNP first on that, but
Yeah.
it's just one. It's a personal preference because we don't have anything else to work with.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the listeners that don't know, Sue, how long you been running the Men's Rights Agency for?
Just about 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yep.
So I think I'm probably adequately expertise to say it's got worse,
Yeah.
much worse than it ever was. And they're not stopping, which really worries me. As you say, we've got horrendous suicide rate, the splitting up of families, what's happening to the children. And nobody seems to care.
Yeah.
That's what worries me.
No, and that's the problem is that it's fair to say that if these politicians truly wanted to address the 47 male suicides weekly, that you'd be the woman that they pick the phone up to and talk to.
Yeah.
That's where most men are calling to try to get help. And I think pretty much like me, it's hard to give them advice for somewhere to go to get help because there isn't too many places that are willing to help a man or a father.
Well, there was research done 1990s, I think, or 2000, by Professor Pierre Bone from Griffith University. And of the suicide of men, he found that 70% happened because of a relationship breakdown.
Yep.
That's a huge number.
Yeah, it is.
Huge number.
Yep.
So, that's the effect that it has on men. And you can't do this to anyone, man or woman. You can't sort of say to them, you have to leave your house now. You can't see your children. You can't have anything to do with them whatsoever. You can't see the wife. You can't access your bank accounts, your car, anything. You can't go anywhere near them. And we'll tell you when you can go to court. And then what they do when they get them into court, they tell them, oh, look, the easy way for you to get over it, even with your solicitor, the easy way to get over it is to accept an order without admission.
Yep.
And that won't mean anything. It won't give you any problems whatsoever. You'll just walk out of this court and that'll be all over. But that's not true.
No.
And they don't tell them. They don't tell them that if you accept that method, you will still go down in the police database as being a domestic violence perpetrator. And if she wants to ring you up and say, why don't you come around for dinner and say hello to the kids for their birthday or something like that? And if you do that, she'll ring the police and suddenly you're in breach of an order.
Yep.
If the breach is bad enough, you can end up with it's a criminal charge, but you can end up in jail as well.
Yeah.
So
They lock you up nowadays straight away. They don't even care why you're there or whether
yeah,
you're enticed to go there. They just simply lock you up.
yeah.
Yeah. And what
Sending birthday cards, simple things like that, or trying to wave at a child when see them coming out of school or something,
yeah.
It just you can't do it.
No. And as you said, it's the children that are paying the ultimate price. They're being traumatized by one parent against the other, and they just
Absolutely.
they're not being given the opportunity to enjoy their childhood. They're being traumatized before they got a chance to be happy. It's a disgrace the way it's being set up.
Well, they're losing a significant part of their upbringing. Their dad's going to give them his perspective.
Yeah,
After all, they're half his dad, half the dad. So why can't that be recognized? Why can't people understand that? That there are lots of good dads out there who have been treated appallingly, absolutely appallingly.
yep,
I'm surprised that they're still with us
yep,
because the treatment they've had has been absolutely disgusting.
yeah. No,
I
I know
can't
very much
understand
so.
why people will be so cruel, so heartless, and I just don't understand it in that respect. Except that I know that for a woman to do that, she's after the money, and that's about it. She wants the control of the children, which she doesn't have to give dad any time with the children whatsoever, which means child